Michael "Mizzy" Robinson and his alleged killer, Ibo Boone, were affiliated with warring neighborhood factions at the time of Robinson's homicide in 2010, according to testimony from a Norwalk detective Friday. Detective Christopher Imparato testified Friday in Stamford Superior Court that two neighborhood gangs, the Money Green Rolling Twenties, who hail from the Meadow Gardens housing development, and the Hilltop Crips, who hail from the Carlton Court housing development, had an ongoing beef with one another at the time of Robinson's homicide in 2010. In interviews with Norwalk detectives, Boone told police that he had friends who were MGs. As for Robinson, he was affiliated with the Hilltop gang, Imparato said during a hearing outside of the presence of the jury Friday morning. The rest of his testimony was on the witness stand. A day before Imparato's testimony, Assistant State's Attorney Elizabeth Moran argued that this ongoing beef between the two groups in 2010 could provide a motive for Boone's alleged fatal shooting of Robinson on October 29, 2010. Criminal defense attorney Philip Russell had previously argued against Imparato's testimony, claiming it would unfairly prejudice the jury against Boone. "It's a miscarriage of justice to let this in based on these facts. This is not a murder for hire. It's not a shooting motivated by extraterritorial proceedings, it's not a revenge killing for some slight that occurred earlier in the day, the week or in the month, it's not retribution for some attack by the Crips against the Bloods," Russell said during a hearing Thursday on whether Imparato's testimony would be admissible. During that hearing, Assistant State's Attorney Elizabeth Moran argued that Imparato should be allowed to testify about the gang activity in Norwalk at the time that Boone, now 35, allegedly shot and killed Robinson in October 2010. To avoid prejudicing the jury, Moran agreed to have Imparato limit his testimony regarding gang activity in Norwalk to general terms. Did they exist in 2010? What were they? Did they associate with particular neighborhoods, and was there a conflict between them? That is essentially what the state would seek to admit at this point, and if they had any affiliations with any additional larger gang and if they existed at that time. Nothing specific about anybody in the case, nothing specific about the facts of this case, Moran said. Russell argued that any ties to local gangs were irrelevant to the murder trial. He said that, if you were to view the state's case in a favorable light, the shooting appeared to stem from a dispute over money, not gang activity. Russell also argued that the expert gang testimony would not only prejudice the jury against his client, but also a few of his star witnesses, whom he claims can provide an alibi for Boone. Those witnesses, Stacey Sawyer, Andre McRae and Jamal Pratt, are expected to testify later in the trial that they were with Boone at Norwalk Hospital visiting McRae's newborn child at the time of Robinson's homicide in a different part of town. Russell claimed those witnesses could also be implicated as fellow gang members of Boone and therefore their testimony could be undercut. "I can't cross-examine him, Imparato, without stepping on my own witnesses. I'm put in this box by this allegation, which is prejudicial in the first place to the defendant, but now you've stymied the ability to get my alibi witnesses a fair hearing," Russell argued. In response, Moran argued that the issues of gang activity have already been included in prior testimony during the murder trial. Earlier this week, former police detective Sergeant Garrett Kruger, a Norwalk police officer who headed Robinson's homicide investigation between 2010 and 2013, testified that Robinson and Boone were on two opposing sides of a gang dispute. Boone, he said, was affiliated with a group out of the Meadow Gardens housing complex and Robinson was associated with a group based out of the Rudner Court housing development. Despite Russell's repeated objections, Judge John Blah ultimately ruled that the gang testimony would be permitted.